Daily trading recap. It is Thursday, the 17th of February, 2022. Big ol' lost day on the P&L. Let's go over some fundamentals first before I go hard deep into today's events. Some market volume today. NASDAQ $241 billion volume. NYSE $322 billion volume. OTCs $1.7 billion volume on the day. Just for reference, we are just about 2 hours after the close. As of right now, came into today looking to do the exact same spread trade that I have been trying these past 2 weeks now that I've been going after it hard and slowly sizing up the account more. And now today, adding on another layer of using the spread trade, looking for both movement beyond to the upside of the open price and below the open price as well, using the data or whatever collection that I've gotten, this little tiny small amount of data, and now getting into more, like I mentioned yesterday, with the GEX and gamma volatility aspect, gamma exposure aspect of it, to use that as a potential indicator for hedging of the bigger players, of the market makers, to see if there is more induced volatility or more movement that way, or more assured, convicted volatility to occur within the day because of that. But today was just not one of those days. And it's, I try to push it a little bit more because it is an options expiration week or day tomorrow, and options expiration week this week. Past 3 Thursdays for sure have been producing beyond a 0.25% price action above the open price and below the open price. And I think in the past 50 days, it is closer to an 80%, 70 to 80% hit rate to be hitting that 0.25% price target that I was looking for today. So came into today wanting to, in the knowledge that we've been just this little slowly downtrending or whatever gigs that we've been in, just not so super hard convicted that we were going to get that, for me to try to push my luck in a sense to say I'm looking for 0.25% above and 0.25% below the open price. VIX was dropping off a little bit from yesterday coming into today. But overall thinking, gosh, looking at the trend day possibilities that we just don't get really any opportunity above that open price, or really projecting any way, not having any favor, trying to pick a direction that way. How many times I've failed to do that already, and especially even today coming in to do that same thing. But now scaling into my approach to say, well, I think there is a very high probability. I think there's going to be an extremely high probability that it at least hits 0.1%, which equates to about 3 points on the ES, on the future side of it. So then saying, okay, I know there is a huge possibility for that, but I don't really just want to keep it at that. I do still think there is potential for this to have opportunity to 0.15% to 0.25%, both above and below the open price. They're trying to trade that spread volatility trade with that futures aspect, going both long and short through the modality of ES and MES, of going long and short, whichever one. So added that layer onto the trade today of utilizing, going almost double the position that I started, that I would normally do, of just going 1 ES contract long and then 10 MES short, or vice versa, going 2 MES or 2 ES long and then 20 MES short. That worked out pretty beautifully for the first, and actually doing that strategy today saved me a little bit more than having to do, then pairing that with then exposing myself to push more, looking for a 0.25% both ways, as compared to trying to push for 1.15% both ways on the SPY today from that open price, because you only hit like 0.13%, which would have just barely missed my little limit order fill on the future side. Had that been my trade today, and it would have been a far worse. I wouldn't have taken any profits to the upside, and would have been just all negative exposure on that side, and I would have taken profits shorter from a shorter perspective on that, the short MES or whichever way I took those contracts that way. So would have been a lot more detrimental of a loss today in me trying to totally give it the freedom and the leash to be able to drop however far it wants to drop, and then just play these little wishy-washy games that it always likes to do, of just how it likes to trend and trade on these days. I'm certainly not in the area of trying to predict what the SPY and the overall market wants to do, and of course anything and everything can change it at a moment's notice as well. Like we saw yesterday, for how it just immediately started perking into the close there off of, I forget when news came out off of that. But yeah, today I think was the little gleam of light that I can take from today was that little spread trade, adding another layer on top of it, of just taking the 3 points above and 3 points below, getting that locked in to say, hey, I knew that was a high probability trade. Now, not only have I locked in profits or taken decent chunk of profits to give me a little bit more of a padding. But now I can say, okay, now I can play the actual probability trade that I really want to, but just is not so much of a huge hit rate that makes me feel so convicted to make that my only exposure today on that type of trade. So yeah, of course, looking at this chart at the end of the day in hindsight, that was the high of day there in this little, what are we calling that, the 10th minute candle. This little attempt to reclaim above VWAP just gets absolutely hammered, rejected. Eventually we find a bottom, try to reclaim VWAP again, show some little perks here, but just continually fades and fades and fades. And the thought that's going through my head the whole time, of course I'm getting away from the screen, just not focusing on the tick by tick action, but a thought that just kept reeling over my mind of, I always want to be positive and think, okay, yeah, it looks really bleak now, but it can just turn around in a second. But also on the flip side of that coin, that, man, it looks very bad now, and it can get very worse in a very short amount of time. So I knew a loss like this would eventually have to come with this type of strategy. And it's all on me. I can't blame anybody else that I'm shocked by this size of a loss, because that's the tough part with this strategy of trying to find a very high hit rate. But obviously nothing is ever 100%, but knowing that when is going to be the stop point. I can't cut losses quickly like a Tim Sykes mentality or a small cap or OTC trade mentality. This strategy is just a weird little niche of, it's awesome and it's great when it's working, and you can get out very rapidly within the little morning volatility and just be free to go on and do whatever I want to do with the rest of my day. But it's on days like this where sometimes it ends up working out, similar to this day. Yesterday we had Wednesday, and sometimes it just goes even harder against you. We're closing 2% in the red from a crazy close that we had yesterday, which is pretty insane to see today. But it's price action. You can't argue with price action. I can try to throw all the data I want at this to say, no, that's wrong. Like the probability and the percentages, none of that matters at the end of the day when it's comes face to face with the reality of taking losses like these ones. So I did save myself a little bit getting out here for that long, I think it was a long ES contract, eventually closing it out here from that open that I did originate that position out here. And then of course it does perk a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, screw, I know it's going to start ramping just crazily into the close here. But sure enough, it did break a little bit lower. Anyway, so good cut in that regard for that one. So I think there's a lot of positives to take away from today's trade, and I carry the same perspective that I had from yesterday, my biggest P&L day that I've ever had, my biggest P&L trade that I've ever had of $760. Now pairing that, coming off of that into today with my first 4-figure P&L trade. Of course, it's to the downside. I carry that same perspective of there's still a lot more work to do, and I'm nowhere near dead. And I'm so very glad and grateful for just taking in the broad perspective of where I am and who I am. I'm a 22-year-old kid with I've got no mortgage, no kids, no wife, no real world obligations. And this is not the end of me whatsoever. And it's just of course, I don't want to continue this, lose like 2,000 every single day. But obviously this is just another learning lesson. It is going to be nowhere near the biggest loss that I ever have in this trading career. And it's certainly not going to be the last. So keeping that in mind when I had to force myself and knew I had to look at that number eventually. Great exposure, great experience all around, and continuing refinement for what this strategy is. And this may be another day that awakens me to realize that, okay, this type of strategy is awesome. Like I mentioned, of some days when it works, it is just totally awesome, and it gets you out nice and quick, and it's just an easy little sit. You don't have to pick direction. You just push buttons, and you just set it, forget it, and it does what it wants to do, and it puts the money in your bank account automatically almost. But then it's the days like this when that very nice hit rate, but on that small chance that it does end up happening on days like this, that it just sucks very much. So I knew that going in. I can't say that this is just a shocker or that it's anybody else's fault. This is totally my fault. I should have also known if I'm angry or upset at the total P&L loss, then I should have known what I would have been willing to risk in order to not let this get so deep against me. It's nobody else's fault, it's mine. But I think that's all I had for that trade. I also had a paper on MRIN yesterday that I saw just as I closed the video from yesterday. Beautiful, beautiful. And then I want to bring up as well it's a 50 million floater, just for reference. They also do have I've traded this one before on the 7th, but just as reference as well as of right now for dilution. They got a $50 million at the money offering, another $100 million from a shelf. But they do have plenty of cash, so it's not like they were going to drop it precisely today or that they needed to with the pump of this stock on the news catalyst. But going back to the 7th of January here, I believe it was the 7th of January. Let's see if that was a Friday. Yes, on this day of releasing that news after the close from the previous trading day, this one going into a Friday. Similar news catalyst of an integration with Amazon on this day, and I think it was an integration with TikTok today was the news catalyst. But similar perk in that we're seeing, and then just after that begins to curl back to VWAP and not really have anything else coming into the pre-market of the next day. Just continues to look weak and does whatever it wants to do. Actually has a dip and rip similar to how it had today, but just weak and downtrending price action for that pre-market, which produces the trade that I'm looking for. This little block of taking it from anywhere around this like 4.7 to 4.8ish area, and then covering with a nice little 4.1, 4.2 cover before market open. And did the same thing today with my paper position. Of course, since I've been transferring, not been taking any real day trades with that margin account, been moving more of the funds away from that into the futures account. So now I have not enough funds to trade with that margin account, which was frustrating. Even though I do, it just doesn't let you reserve like the 100 shares through trade zero. Stupidity, whatever. So couldn't short it, wanted to short the crap out of it. Mentally got a little 4.3-ish, 4.37-ish, 4.34-ish that I wrote here. Holding this thing overnight looked absolutely beautiful, perfect. Pre-market opens up today. We just get the nice little gap down. Cover under VWAP here, under $4, just with my first half. Mentally, I was in that stop and then let it do. Of course, I'm focusing on the SPY trade, the ES trade for the morning session, but watching it, hey, has a nice little dip and rip. Same type of thing. I think Chris actually nailed this one pretty nicely with a little dip and rip trade, but then just hung around VWAP, continued to cling. Sketchy for me, I want to say, to continue to hold that last half of shares, but knew I had a very comfortable position of power for my position, and was able to let it, after this little weird, crazy candle test here with big volume, to reject that, to shove it back under VWAP and let it trace all the way down to 3.7. Very beautiful trade paper, mental trade to watch that one, to be a part of, and to know that, hey, I was right there and ready to be a part of it, pounce on it, but just kind of where I'm directing myself as of right now with the trades, going more to the future route of, I'm glad to know that I'm still in the loop a little bit with these types of trades that way, with these playbook trades that I've acquired or accumulated as of yet. That is all I have. I've not done any hard scans as of yet. Just continuing to big, just emotional mental test today. I think it's more so than anything of finding more charts or finding the next trade. Just today is that big, obviously it's a big number, and trying to wrap my brain around for the first time that 4 digits. And of course, it's got to be $2 grand today instead of just the 1 to introduce me to that 4-digit number. But we're still standing. We're still going on to the next day. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Shout out Kelly Clarkson. I sincerely thank you guys for watching. We will catch you guys on the next one.